Now we're testing, and I think we're on the right wavelength at this time.
Very emotionally upset that day.
Well, that's it.
Well, that was a tough deal.
I was sitting there watching that game. I was all day long, all morning leading up to it, you know.
That's what it was.
You know what?
It was a big build-up the whole weekend.
Oh, and not only that, but I went to Wally's house to a cocktail party with a bunch of other people after the game, you know, and a few people knew that I wrote the book, you know.
So they had to give you the business.
Everybody gave me the old raspberry, you know.
Naturally.
You know, what happened to the Browns?
Even though they might have been pulling for them themselves.
Yeah, and at work the next day, you know, I said, well, the big problem was that I didn't suit up. I didn't play, you know. If I'd played, it might have been different. How's that working?
Yeah, I thought. Incidentally, we talked with Dorothy
I
Fulton,
bet they
and she... I beg pardon, baby?
I just said, I bet they bumped him.
Yeah, a little bit.
Well, you know, people are terrible. People are worse than anybody. Like I used to say when I was a kid, people have more fun than anybody.
Turn that off a second. The New York.
Flipping books.
Well, we have the large albums downstairs with all the pre-trial clippings. If you want to look at them today or take them with you.
I don't need them, I don't think. I think I got them.
I think you have enough. World had them, and Xerox, what they thought was important.
I don't think if I need them, I need to reference anything, why I'll come take a look at them.
Well, there are about 5 huge books. The brief that Corrigan prepared for the Supreme Court of Ohio includes most of the damaging.
And I have that.
Yeah, you have that, and he goes into the intricacies of it, so I don't think that's going to be a problem.
What? No.
Now, the one point was to be sure and get straight on what we already have. Another thing was that I told Ariane about some of the men who in prison were placed in solitary confinement and on the mental range, which is a place where the men are physically abused, merely because they were fighting their case legally. I think we talked about this before.
I don't remember you saying that.
Well, that's what Ariane said, and so she wanted me to be sure to tell you this. There were several men who had no families outside to fight for them or go to bat for them, and because they had studied and read and dug out some of the law of our American heritage and so forth, they were first placed in solitary confinement, and then if they persisted, put on a mental range and called nuts. The psychiatrist had difficulty coping with this, and one psychiatrist who was a very top man quit because of this. He insisted that he would not permit the institution to use his psychiatric range of cells, or psychiatric ward as he tried to call it, as a persuasion center to prevent men from pursuing their legal rights, you see. I've seen at least 3 men and attempted to save their lives that committed suicide because of the hopelessness of this situation. How many more there may have been, I have no way of knowing, but I know that it was a terrible thing, and that, of course, this is a rather obvious tie-up with Ariane and our association, because the reason Ariane was denied privilege to visit and our privilege to communicate by letter is because she was helping me with my legal case. And she insisted upon my innocence and wouldn't hear of anything else. So that was one point.
What was this mental range like? What was it actually?
Well, it was, it's a triple decked range. This seems to be working all right. It's a triple high cell compound with individual single cells. And there are 2 or 3 padded cells there. And there's a guard in attendance, but there are some of the convicts that actually run the place. They're usually, in fact, I was asked to work there 2 or 3 times, and well, when I was not at the hospital or was not available to the hospital because Mr. Koblenz didn't want any more publicity via Argosy about how we had maybe saved somebody or done some good, or about our nursing school. But I wouldn't go to work there because the men that worked there were called upon to sometimes necessarily affect brutality. There would be a guy in there that if you didn't get him first, he'd get you. And I'm not afraid of anybody, but I don't want to have to go after somebody and just have to knock them down. And in other words, I don't blame the men who worked there because they did what they had to do. And some of the men on the mental range were psychotic. But over half, and I get this from the men that worked on the mental range, the other convicts, and they are convicts, they're good guys. At least they were when I was there. They don't try to just be big, bad, terrible guys and beat up on somebody because they're in the driver's position. But they've got to protect themselves against a true psychotic. But they had told me that over 50% of the cases are just cases that the administration, the officials want to prevent from having a typewriter, for instance, or availability to the law library, so that they can't write writs, so they can't prepare material for themselves. And the thing that got me is that one of the worst offenses in that penitentiary was to prepare a legal preparation such as a writ of habeas corpus or any legal action for another man. Say I had been in the pen 10 years, which I've been, and you come in on a phony B for an odd type of a sentence. Maybe the judge hasn't signed the papers, or there's some variation, or you haven't done the thing and they got you because they politically think you should be exterminated. And I start to prepare a writ of habeas corpus for you, then I'm put in solitary confinement, and so are you. And from there, if we persist, we'll both be put on the mental range. Nothing to do with any mental evaluation at all. Just because I'm trying to help you with your legal recourse, which you're entitled to, by any means you can obtain. And this I resent deeply. I think there's a guy in prison named Slick Malone. They call him Slick because he is slick. Now he's in prison, he's going to be there for God knows how many years. He's a stick-up man, and they've got him on at least 10 to 25, and he's pulled maybe 15. They can hang him for another 10 years, and they will. Why? Because he is a jailhouse lawyer, and he knows the law well enough that he's helped one or two guys out already, and the officials are mad as hell at him, and he's been in solitary confinement 3 times before I left. He just got out before I left. He came up to school, got a pass to school just to see me and shake my hand. He said, "Doc, boy, you're a hell of a guy. Boy, don't give him an inch." And he said, "You know, I just hope I live long enough to meet Lee Bailey." Now here's a guy that spent about 10 months in solitary confinement the last time.
10 months?
Yeah, 10 months. And on the range just above the death row. They call it L block. They number the blocks by letters A, B, C, D, E, F, and then they go to I, J, K, and L.
L is the solitary block, and the lowest range, the floor range, is death row, where the death men, or men who are waiting to be executed, are placed. And the entire range is treated the same. They have no, well, the death row men get more privileges than the others. They get a radio, plug-in radio. They can switch on 3 stations. And the men, like Malone was in, get no radio. They get an occasional book if they can smuggle it in. They get limited commissary, a candy bar now and then, but no smoking. Now this is pretty tough on guys who are habitual smokers. This is solitary.
They're solitary, yes. They leave a
were you
solid
in there?
note. Well, I was in the hole. Now the hole is solitary confinement too, but it's an intensive thing on usually a 1 to 10 day basis. I was in there twice.
That's
And then there was well, no, that's when in just a cell, but between the doors is in the hole, and that is real intensive. A man couldn't stand anything. 3 days between the doors is about all they expect anybody to stand. In fact, I understand years ago they had a death after a 4-day period. They opened the doors and the man was dead. And fortunately, the man had for them, the man had no family or nobody that knew what to do to give him enough help. But between the doors and so forth is in the hole. But L block is the extended solitary period. So anyway, this guy has been in and out of the hole and L block for a long time, and in 3 prolonged periods that I know of, just because he tried to help someone with their legal case. This is wrong. This is morally wrong. I'm not saying Slick Malone is the nicest guy in the world, because he isn't. He's a stick-up man and everything, but at least this is one of the true nice things a man's tried to do in all of his lifetime, and here they're trying to deter that. That's what bothers me.
So most of these guys in this psycho cell block, or about half of them are probably really psychotic, and the other half are guys they just put there for.
That's right.
To get rid of them.
That's right. And this Slick Malone was on this psycho range for about 2 stretches, but the men who took care of the psychotics, the convicts who are the nurse convicts, know Slick. And they treated him well, and they brought him food and candy bars and snuck him cigarettes and gave him extra sleeping pills and things. And so they got him the hell out of there. He was having a ball there. Yeah.
Did you tell Bill about the guy who was supposed to go to the chair, and how he was saved from the chair by
Well, I don't.
You want to tell it?
They weren't injections. They were pills. The scopolamine.
And the guy's still alive nowadays. You want to
Yeah.
tell it?
Well, the thing is, we don't dare divulge his name because he's still alive. But this guy was known to have been. He was a murderer. There was no doubt about it. But he murdered for a reason. He murdered because he found his wife in bed, or somebody in his bed in his home, and well, he just got a gun out of his dresser drawer and killed them both right in bed. Well, I don't know what you think, but I have a pretty good idea, and if this isn't some reason for doing something, then there is no reason. Anyway, in prison, I very seldom gave out information, such as how to remove fingerprints, which I know how to do, of course. How to affect death without leaving a trace of how death was accomplished and so forth. But in this particular case, I was asked, how could we make this man appear to be a true psychotic, so he wouldn't have to go to the electric chair. Well, a common medicine that they use there to make the psychotic men docile is scopolamine hydrochloride. Well, this is, of course, one component of twilight sleep that they used to use for childbirth. It causes not only a pre-psychotic or psychotic state, but it produces amnesia. This drug in prison is often used in a cruder form, either by pill or injection. And I think you're right, Ariane, it was injected.
Yeah.
But the point is this, that I merely said, if you want to make this guy nutty, just give him a little talk beforehand and tell him that he's a little bit nutty, and then give him the injection. It's a little like hypnosis in that you can give them a pre-suggestion. And this guy climbed the walls, and he defecated in his little bedpan, and then he painted the walls with his shit. Well, this of course was and is something that relates to true loss of realism, reality, or disconnection with reality. And as a result, a board of psychiatrists came in, and just before the psychiatrist came in, the man was given another good solid shot of this stuff, a little more than average. And he really was, he didn't have to, there was no show put on. He was out of his head, and he was screaming, yeah, and you could hear him all over the pen. And he tried to pee out the door on the doctors, and they were afraid to go inside. He was a great, big, strong guy, big colored man, strong as a bull. And he got in the corner and crouched down. All right, come in and get me, you know. Well, who in the hell was the only guy that could handle him was the nurse, who happened to be an associate of mine who taught me how to wrestle, Bing Grambo. He was the...
Well, who gave the guy the shots?
Bing Grambo.
He gave him the shot.
Yeah, but it was with the doctors okay, because they use that medicine to, it ordinarily quiets a man and makes him docile if he's given a pre-suggestion. Now you're going to go to sleep, everything's going to be all right. It's used, still used in childbirth.
But they gave him an overdose, was that it? Is it?
They gave him more than is usually used
Does the
for
doctor want to
sedation.
make him cuckoo too? Or?
No, it's just that they just don't know what in the hell they're doing down there. That's what the thing is. Scopolamine, notoriously, we know, makes the patient lose a track of reality. And this is why it's good for childbirth, because it's part of the amnesia thing. When the woman wakes up, she's had all kinds of pain having the baby, perhaps, but she doesn't remember it. So she thinks it's great.
Yeah, but I'm still not sure. Who gave him this? The hospital officials gave him this scope.
They ordered it, and their order was carried out by this nurse.
Yeah, but they didn't tell him to give him any pre-suggestion, did they? Or they?
No, of course not.
Well, that was what was driving the guy nuts.
Well, plus the fact that he used a syringe that he'd used for other patients, and he'd probably saved maybe just a drop or two on other patients. But when he filled the syringe with this patient for his dosage, it was a full dose plus maybe 3 or 4 drops from other patients with a new needle, and instead of giving it in the muscle like is ordinarily given, he give it intravenously, and this hits the guy, bang, boy, and this makes him.
And before he did that, he told him he was nuts.
That's right. And he told him to smear his shit on the wall, and he told him to make his eyes as big as he could, and he told him that he was an animal and that he should attack anybody that opened that door, including himself. Anybody opens that door, attack. And that's what the guy did.
Under the influence of this drug.
Sure.
Now, how about when the drug wore off?
Well, by then the psychiatrists were gone. They had already written their report, and the guy was scheduled to go to Lima. He's at Lima today. Never has been executed. And the day he left, this nurse told him, now, don't act too smart when you get there.
Did he know?
Stay a little bit nutty.
Did the guy know that he was getting this stuff to act nutty?
Sure.
Oh, I mean, he told me.
Yeah, but he told him he couldn't put on the show. This would be necessary. And it worked. And it fooled 5 psychiatrists, a board of 5 psychiatrists.
That's wild.
They all declared him nuts.
They all declared him absolutely psychotic and beyond any realization of punishment, and that electrocution would be beyond humane standards, and so they couldn't possibly electrocute this man. And then I told the nurse to tell him, now when he goes to Lima, there aren't very many too smart people down there. Most of them are men that are coming there to learn something more, doctors that were there to learn more than real sharp psychiatrists. So I told the nurse to tell him, just be nutty, a little bit nutty, you know. Just maintain some screwy effects. Always pee in the corner instead of a urinal, or try not to be too repulsive or they'll put you in a padded cell. But become docile but dumb, and act like you don't know your wife and your brother or anybody that might come to visit you. Act like you don't know who they are.
Stuff like that.
Things of that sort, but be agreeable and controllable, so that he can live some sort of enjoyable life. He can watch television and maybe be a ward boy and wheel patients around that are paralyzed or something like that. And the last word that I heard is that's just exactly what he's doing. He's a ward boy, and he carries bedpans, and he works like hell. And in fact, one of his idiosyncrasies that he's developed is that he wants to work all the time. And he wants to scrub the floor. He won't mop. He wants to do it on his hands and knees. And he gets a toothbrush and works like they did in the Army, you know. He remembered his Army experience, how they made him clean a Jeep with a toothbrush. And so he uses a toothbrush on the edges of the floor and all the corners and goes all around, and flies bug him and everything. And this, well, he's smart enough to have gotten the picture, you see. And so they all think he's still nuts, you know. He's nuts like a fox.
You talk about this guy who was eligible for parole since 5 years. Is that the one you mentioned before?
No.
That's another one.
Well, this, in what we're talking about, there was a man who's been eligible for parole for 5 years and over now. And he has not been given a parole because he has contested the right of the parole board to act as a judiciary body.
Mm.
The parole board is not a judge. No one of them is a judge. And for them to judge that a man should do more time is not within their realm, according to this man. And he's right, of course. In Michigan, this was tested, and the man who took it to court was turned loose finally. This man has been screwed around from pillar to post, and Judge Underwood has been very active in that effect, or in that particular phase of things, of delaying and reverting the case and all that. But he has a point, a very strong legal point, if he can ever get it out of Ohio, you see, and out from under Judge Underwood.
He's through now, Underwood, isn't he?
I guess he is, but this man is around 50-some years old himself. And they offered him a parole if he would quit his legal battle, similar to my deal. And he told him to go take a flying, a rolling donut, you know. That,
Well, he doesn't want to get out too bad.
he wants out, but he's too old to start anything new now. Oh, maybe some people may say I didn't want out too bad either. You know, what if our action hadn't come through?
Then
What if I get convicted again? I don't know.
mention that
Now, I could have taken a parole within 3 months and still be out, but what would I be? I'd be, I couldn't get married until they gave me permission. I couldn't I couldn't go to the can unless they gave me permission. And to me, well, it's easy to say sitting here in a comfortable home, but I would have gone out on parole, or any way I could get out. But I wanted, when they suggested parole shortly, 6 or 8 months before Judge Weinman's decision, I suggested a final release parole. That's what I wanted, a termination with no, to be released. And I don't care if they called me a ex-convict or what, as long as there was no parole, life parole. Life parole means they control me the rest of my life. I can't go out of the state without permission. I can't leave the country without permission. And in fact, I can't. Very seldom do they allow anyone to leave the country. I couldn't get married without permission. And if I did get married, my wife would be under their relative supervision. And I think this guy's name is Duncan. No, it isn't Duncan. Well, you don't care about his name, but he's...
about that writ on toilet paper, that one, you know about it, one of several cases.
Well, Gideon, down in Florida, wrote his original writ of habeas corpus. It wasn't on toilet paper, but it was on very crude paper.
Yeah.
And it was sent back by the state authorities as being not acceptable, and Gideon, as I recall, called in a federal agent, and the federal agent said it could be written on toilet paper, that this is a federal right of every man to recourse. And since then, there have been several men down in Columbus that have called the federal agents in when they've had the opportunity, but they've had to use the priest or somebody or a family, you see, to get in touch with the federal agents.
Well, if they feel that their rights are being violated, you can call the federal agents?
Surely, if they have somebody to call. But if they don't have any family or anybody, they're in trouble.
The officials will get them for you.
No, hell no.
But these federal agents, no, I just want you to comment on that. The federal agents picked up the toilet paper breach, right?
Sure they did.
You know that about one or two cases?
In Florida.
No, I mean here in the toilet paper.
Well, then they insisted on the penitentiary of getting a law library.
So it never went out in toilet paper? Well, not actually, no. Oh, you told me that's different.
One writ actually went out on toilet paper, and that's when the state officials held back and said that this was not permissible. And the man was lucky enough to get word out to the, well, he sent word to the FBI, is what he did. And an agent of the federal marshal federal marshal's office came in and asked about it, and he told the officials that it could be sent out on any kind of paper.
Yeah.
And but it would behoove the officials to have a writ or any legal preparation typed up with proper paper and proper typing, because there are typists all over the institution working for the deputy warden and the printer and all the officials in there.
Yeah.
The menu is typed up every week and mimeographed. The least they could do is help some guy that has a writ. So, though it did go out and he took it out to his boss, it didn't go on to the court until it was then typed in a proper legal form. So it didn't actually go to the court on toilet paper.
Yeah, but actually it could be.
Well, according to the Supreme Court, it can be.
Would you like to comment on this, to tell the story about the guy who made the research on the room that hogs have and the room that a convict has?
I think we covered that.
We talked
Oh,
about that,
did we?
didn't we?
Well, okay, then we didn't know that.
That he had a writ stating that the convict has that less room than a hog
On
must
the
have
state
in
front.
order to get state help.
Yeah. Okay, well then we cover
So
all
that's
this.
it.
Yeah. Why don't you flip that off, because I want to make a point. Oh, he's in Hong Kong now?
Sam had his birthday on the 29th, and just shortly before 12 o'clock when the 29th started, we had the phone call from Hong Kong. And so he wished his dad happy birthday and told us a little bit. And so just 2 days ago we received this letter.
Well, you can read the whole letter, but he tells of some of his adventures, and he told us he had a terrible New Year's. He didn't want to tell us how terrible it was.
I read that now.
And yeah, it's just really funny.
On the second page.
Well, Happy New Year. It's the second here now. You really want to know what I did New Year's Eve? Question mark. It's so bad, I don't think I can tell you. I better not. And then new paragraph. At that time, Ariane put the letter away. She was afraid to read the rest. She went to the mail, to the mail office, post office. I still call it mail offices, penitentiary, without me, and she started to read the letter alone. So anyway, next paragraph. What I really did was hit the rack about 7 o'clock and slept for a couple of hours. Got up and read Sherlock Holmes until 12:30 and went back to bed. Good New Year's Eve. Here we were worried he was out with some old slut or something, you know.
Yeah. And I was not worried about that. I was worried because he tells us things he's with girls and so. But I was worried we lost his confidence. I thought, what?
Oh, you were afraid he wasn't going to tell us.
He doesn't tell us anymore. What's happened?
Oh, yeah, when he
Is this
said it was so
separation
bad, I
going
better
to
not.
us? That's why I was upset. Not what he might have done. I couldn't tell him.
Well, I was afraid he needed some penicillin or something. Anyway, saw the Beatle movie Help last night, which was kind of weird but good. We will not be stopping in Singapore, so the mail port will be general delivery Penang, Malaya for the first week in February. Boy, it was really great to talk to you. That's when he called us from Hong Kong the other day. I probably shouldn't call since it just makes me want to hop a plane home. Well, just about 5 months and I'll be home. Hari Maran, I guess that's
Japanese for
or Chinese, for Happy New Year. And you're still the greatest parents ever. Love, Sam. BQP, which is He Who Endures Conquers, of course.
Well, he's really having a good time on that trip.
Oh, yeah.
That's good. Yeah, that's a wonderful.